there, welcome back to another show. Now today I'm going to be talking about Made in England, which is the films of Powell and Pressburger. And before I start today, I'm not going to have videos in probably the next 2 weeks. I've things on in real life that things happen. I just want a bit of time to really do the videos basically at a decent level, so I'm just going to take 2 weeks off. There might be an odd one, but not, they won't have the usual like 4 on a Monday or a Tuesday in this case. But yeah, so just an advance warning, next 2 weeks, no videos. But now I'll go back to my main point, which is Made in England, the films of Powell and Pressburger. This is a documentary financed by BFI and Scottish Screen. And yeah, Scottish Screen financed a film called Made in England. Yeah, of course. I should point out that Pressburger had Scottish links. It was German, but lots of family was from Scotland and stuff like that. So, and Michael Powell loved Scotland and made films in Scotland as well. So, I'm just joking. Right, so the film looks at Powell and Pressburger through interviews, but also through Martin Scorsese talking about them, what the films meant to him as he's grown up, and he talks through the films, not all of them, but the main ones, the ones that were important to him. So it's almost like Scorsese talking about what they meant to him, as well as having a biography of Powell and Pressburger, how they started, how they got together, how they developed, and what drove the partnership apart eventually. And also talking about what the peaks were and when it started to go a little bit wrong for them. So there's a lot there, and the film's like 2 hours 20, and it gives each film some space to look at what the themes are and why the films are important. And it basically logged down to the fact that for a time they were the most important British filmmakers, and then at a certain point they were out of fashion, and that was it. There's no interest in them by the British film industry beyond, they did well in this film, but there was a sense of the British film industry at a certain point moved on from fantasy to supposed realism, but it was just all about the war, and then kitchen sink drama. And Powell Pressburger were at their best during the 40s, when they had a lot of attention on them, because they were doing things that were out of the ordinary and doing things that were really inventive, and basically what the film goers needed during a very difficult time, because they remembered to have fantasy and to have like romance in the films during a time when the world was at war and when the world really needed that. In the 50s and 60s, the world needed that less, so there was less of a draw to them. But the film does go through a lot of the different films and what they all meant. Now, I should say that me and Slotry Rodin on our other channel of podcasts and things, Nazarene Prod. No, that's not Nazarene Prod. Rodin Nazarene. Yes, attacking them on. We've done quite a lot of the Powell Pressburger films in more detail, talking about it with each other, and so I'd suggest you go over to that channel, and I'll leave a link to that channel. But really, that's where you'll get the more detailed look at the individual films. But for now, the films that are really covered are the peak films, like Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. There's The Red Shoes, Black Narcissus, The Small Back Room, Tales of Hoffman. Also the experimental films, the films made in America that didn't turn out so well, and then films that they made later on in the 50s, the Bath of River Plate, and How They Never, and Ill Met by Moonlight, which didn't get much success. You know, the entities for them are why they didn't work, but it's less details there than it is some of the earlier films. The films are successful because this is pretty much a love letter to these films. They even cover films like Spy and Black, is where they kind of first started together, and going to something like Cantrip Tales, which was not a big success but was a big important film for them. It goes into stuff like I Know Where I'm Going, which is a wonderfully romantic film. example, A Matter of Life and Death, which is a film that has been a perennial since it was made. It's one of those films they made that was almost like an instant classic. Or at least in Britain it was. But, I mean, films like The Red Shoes and Matter of Life and Death are films that always remain to be viewed as classics. It's just some of the other films were kind of forgotten for a long time and then slowly been brought back into the public consciousness as excellent films. Now, I would say that I'm biased. Like, Powell, Pressburger, to me, are the best British directors. They just are. They're the best. You know, I was talking to Ronan about this, and basically, I think we both agreed it's basically Powell, Pressburger, Alan Clark, then for me it's Alexander McKendrick. Those are the top three. I'm not sure what his number three is, but he's definitely into. We're along similar roads, I think. But yeah, I mean, even into something like Peeping Tom and some of the other films, like Pressburger made a film, wasn't successful as director. But essentially, what the work is, they worked the general story. Then Pressburger was really in charge of the scripting process with input by Powell. Then when it went over to the production, Powell was in charge of the directing of it, but they were both the producers, so they were both overseeing both sides of it and the post-production. It's just that they understood their strengths and they could make up their weaknesses. I mean, if you look at some of the later films without Pressburger, you can tell that Michael Powell is so good visually, but as a writer, he's not as good. And Pressburger was a prime writer, was a great writer, and without Powell's visual presence, maybe the project didn't really catch life. They kind of needed each other because they were good at where the other person was probably not as good, and they understood that, but they also had similar interests. Like, if it interested Pressburger, it probably interest Powell, so they found projects they both liked, and they both found themselves within like deals with Corder and other producers who were happy to give them some space because it was a production company that had deals with these other bigger producers, so they were part of a slate of films, and they were fine to let them go off and do what they're doing because they were reliable. They could make hits. They could make films that were understood to the general public, and they were also critically acclaimed. And it was a very good deal for everybody in the 40s and early 50s. The film is a love letter to this period, but also shows that there's like Powell could be a little bit of a taskmaster of his crew, and some of them didn't like him. But he was a kind of a dreamer, and he liked to see sort of things a certain way. Like a lot of directors who are really great, sort of certain ways, like this is what we're going to do, and then he'd work with his crew, the ones who understood him, and then he'd bounce off the production designer and the cinematographer and find ways to do it, practical ways. Sometimes it would be very simple ways, and sometimes it would be. But he'd actually work with he understood and respected the people he worked with. So it wasn't just this auteur telling everyone what to do. It's like he understood part of the genius was to bring in people who had better ideas than you did, but also because he had a singular vision, he could get rid of the rubbish and stick to what was really important. In the same way with Pressburger could find this, because there's lots of situations that can make good stories, but you have to find what's the story within that situation to make it effective, to make it understandable and moving to the audience. And Pressburger was great at that, and so they understood where to leave each other alone, but also understood where to collaborate. So it's just one of those great partnerships which you get in cinema sometimes, and which is like one of those things where these two people combined and the other people they knew around them, like the actors and the production people, made something stronger than what they could have done by themselves. So this film pays tribute to that thing of why they were successful, but also shows that at a certain point tastes change, and basically Michael Powell got less and less interested in conventional storytelling. I know during the war they do experimental stuff like Canterbury Tale, which was a simple story but done in a way that was a bit alien to the audience, or Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which I know he worked Winston Churchill, but it was a very moving story. But as time went on, he probably more interested in things like The Red Shoes, which was purely visual, and Tales of Hoffmann, which was basically an opera. and The Red Shoes was a big hit. Tales of Hoffmann wasn't. Tales of Hoffmann did okay, but it wasn't a big hit. And at a certain point, Powell was pushing more into this direction, and the audience was pushing more into like, oh, just win the war. Let's do all these war movies to show how great we are. And Michael Powell could not really be less of an interested director in that kind of film. Like, he just had no interest in that. He was very good at making films during the war, and he can include people in a war situation, but just doing something about a military operation itself held no interest to him. And the films that ended the partnership was basically films like that, where they would have had to do a film that didn't really do much for either of them. It was like, these are kind of mediocre subjects that we've been asked to do by the producer, and they make good money off it, but they weren't good films, at least to them. So it looks into that kind of dynamic of why they were successful, why they were not. But again, you have Scorsese talking about the passion of the films and what they meant to him over the years, because he's a massive Archers fan, you know. But it does. The thing that interested me was you've got Scorsese talking about these films at the end of his career, basically, where he had a great first half and a second half that was. He had some nice bits there, but there was a lot of disappointments. And he's talking about Powell Pressburger, who had the same thing, where they had a great peak period, and then periods were disappointed with the films they made that were. They were pretty much saying that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And Scorsese, even though he's probably had a easier time of it with producers, there's a lot of films there that you're thinking you can't be that happy with some of these things. So the idea is the peak, but also the compromise of filmmaking in a film and a career in the arts, where there's going to be great highs, but there's going to be some lows that are just like probably draining to someone who wants to do better. So that's why I found it interesting Scorsese talking about them, because you could see his career in similar paths, really. And you see a lot of careers from the movie brats. The movie brats were very influenced by Powell Pressburger, like Scorsese, De Palma, and Coppola. And all of them had that same thing of they had early hits, and then the second half of their career was much more of a struggle, because they were interested in expanding things in a way that the industry wasn't. So, even George Lucas, he did it his own way, where he expanded things like special effects, but he was still trying to push the envelope a little bit in his own way. And the industry wasn't that interested. They wanted just punch pap. So he kind of suggests an influence by Powell Pressburger on the movie brats, but also like where that tends to lead in the industry. I think anyone in the film industry in a long-term career, you're going to have disappointments. It's just the way it is. But the good thing is this film doesn't. It acknowledges that, and acknowledges the passing of time and what happens to careers, but also is enthusiastic about the great stuff they made, about why a certain peak of films were there that really delivered, and the things that will keep people coming back. There was a good 10-year run where they were just knocking them out of the park one after another, where even like the weakest films were amazing. It's like that's hard to do. Even the bombs were stunning. So that's a love letter film, and I really enjoyed it, and I'd highly recommend it. But also, if you liked this video, I would say go to see our Ronan Nazarene talks on the other Powell Pressburger films, because we went into a lot more detail than I can here, and we went into detail with specific films. So that's the video for now. I hope you enjoyed it. See you later. Bye.